This is chapter 13, which is called Teams at Work. I like this cover page because it has the pit crew working all together as a team. It's a very good example of a team. As usual, we'll start with some definitions. A group is a collection of individuals who interact and where one person's actions have an impact on the others. Kind of common sense. Don't worry too much about the definition of a group. An informal group is a natural and spontaneous grouping of people, such as going out for drinks, as you can see in the picture. A formal group is deliberate and systematic groupings of people in an organization. Every time you call a meeting, this is a formal group. Creating a team or a task group or a division or a department, these are all formal groups. Informal groups are groups that people create themselves and they're not designated to, and they're usually more social. The group process is how the group approaches its work, and this can help or hinder the team's effectiveness, depending on if it's a good approach. A work team is an independent collection of individuals who share responsibility for specific outcomes for their organizations. So again, we're going to be talking about groups and teams in the context of organizations, employees, businesses, not sports teams. We are going to discuss how groups develop first. There are several theories on group development. As you can imagine, if you've ever worked in a group, the group dynamics and the way that a group works and how effective it is, it changes over time. The first time you meet your group members, you're not necessarily ready to work together. So Tuckman created these 5 stages of group development back in 1965. The stages are forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning. I guess they couldn't find one that rhymed for the last step. Forming is the first step, and this is where the team acquaints and establishes ground rules. They meet each other, tell each other their names and basic facts about who they are. Next comes storming. As you can see by the little picture, this can be a little rough. The members start to communicate their feelings, but they kind of view themselves still as individuals rather than part of the team. They might resist control by group leaders or show hostility toward each other. Everyone's still kind of working out the kinks here before they can get things rolling. The third step is norming. This is where things start to come together. People start to feel part of the team, and they realize that they can achieve work if they accept other viewpoints. They realize it's better to work together. They start to come around, and Stage 4 comes in, performing. This is where the majority of the work is done during the performing stage of group development. During this stage, the team works in an open and trusting atmosphere where flexibility is the key and hierarchy is of little importance. Everyone's just getting their work done. Nobody's worrying about who's in charge. Everyone's just working, performing. Finally, the job is done. It's time for adjourning. The team conducts an assessment of the year or of their task, what they've been working on. They can debrief, and that's a very good thing for groups at this point, is to talk and debrief about how things went, conduct self-assessments, and make a plan for transitioning out of this group. However, further research showed us that it's not really just a 5-stage thing and then it's done. Sometimes groups can progress over time, and this theory is called punctuated equilibrium. And as you see in the graph, the group starts to progress over the beginning, and then it stays stable for a little while. But after a little while, then it progresses again. Then it stays stable, and then it evolves again. So unlike that first model where everything evolved and everyone was ready to perform and then it was over, during the performing time, during the work, we can see that there are different periods of stability and different periods of evolution. The punctuated equilibrium theory tells us that groups change course in their approach to their work over time. They cycle between the transition planning phase, which is the flat part, and the action phase, which is the slanted part. right? Where things are changing, stuff is getting done. All right, now we'll talk about types of teams. The types of teams described on this slide have to do with what their jobs are. However, the first one can be in any kind of job, and actually some of them can be in any kind of job. The first one is cross-trained teams, which are teams where members are trained to perform multiple roles beyond their own. A lot of different workplaces may have teams of people who can do everybody's job on the team, not just their own. This is considered a cross-trained team. Service teams are teams that work to ensure high-quality outcomes over repeated situations. These are usually customer service, customer support, flight attendants, service industry, servers, all those kinds of people that are working together to provide a good experience for the customer. Project teams are teams that deal with ideas. These are often cross-functional or cross-trained teams. Knowledge workers and those in resource and development are often put into project teams. These are thinkers. I tried to put little emojis that would help you. So for the cross-trained one, you see the same lady is trained to do all those different jobs. The service team examples would be food and beverage or flight attendants. Project teams are thinkers, research and development or knowledge. Next comes production teams. These are makers, teams that make or process things. The example is computer chip manufacturers, but there are tons of examples. Next is management teams. This can also be in several different industries, all industries. These are teams that include the top leaders within organizations, usually consisting of the highest executive and his or her direct subordinates. Most big organizations have management teams. That's kind of a given. Advisory teams can be consultants, teams that include task forces with a one-time objective, and quality control groups to make suggestions to improve the workplace, improve a process or a product. These advisory teams or consultants, again, have one-time objectives. They often don't work for the organization itself. And finally, action or performance teams are teams that deal with emergencies and crises, such as surgical teams and bomb squads. They got to work together to get things done fast, and they can't make mistakes. Lots of different types of teams. This is an important slide. Next is team effectiveness. Team effectiveness measures two facets of teams. Team effectiveness measures the team viability, which is the ability and desire of group members to continue to work with one another. Right? How much do they want to keep working together? Do they like this team? Is it working out for them? Effectiveness also measures team performance, successful delivery of an output to customers inside or outside the organization. So team effectiveness, again, is measuring two things: the team viability, how much the team wants to stay together, and the team performance, how well they perform, their production or their output. On the right side, you can see all the factors related to team effectiveness. There are three main groups of factors which can lead to team effectiveness. The first is the group composition. What's the size, tenure, personality, and diversity of the group? All of those things can affect the effectiveness of this team. Group processes, such as teamwork skills, norms, roles, and conflict, all affect team effectiveness. And group affect and cognition issues such as cohesion, psychological safety, and collective efficacy. There are probably a lot of words here that are not familiar to you, unless you already read the textbook, but I will explain them, don't worry. We'll do one slide for each of the things that can affect team effectiveness. The first one is in the category of group composition, and it is size. Group size is how many members belong to the group. Important to understand for this issue is the concept of social loafing. Social loafing is the tendency for group members to put forth less effort when they're participating in a joint activity than they would if they were acting individually. The more people are in the group, the more social loafing goes on. People do less when there are more people around. They think other people will do it. They're loafing off them. Larger groups have less support and fewer personal connections. This results in decreased individual productivity. Individuals in larger groups expend less effort, take less responsibility, and have lower performance than those in smaller groups. In general, we see that small groups are better than big groups. Yes, more work gets done if you add more people, but it's not a proportionate amount of work, right? If you have a group with 200 people instead of 100 people, you're not going to get double the amount of work. You're going to have a bigger cost in hiring those people, not worth it. Another thing that can affect team effectiveness is the tenure of the group. Group tenure is a measure of how long members have belonged to a certain group. The picture on the left is from the last episode of Friends. They were in their group of friends for 10 years together. That's a long time. That's a lot of group tenure. The longer that a group stays together, the more effective it can be. Groups with high churn, where group members join and exit frequently, have lower effectiveness. We want people to join and stay in our group. High group tenure is good. Something else that affects team effectiveness is the personality of the people in the group. You'll see the big 5 that we know about on your screen right now, and you'll see the green boxes next to conscientiousness and agreeableness, because these are related to group effectiveness. The red ones are not important. It doesn't mean they're negatively affected to effectiveness. They're not related at all. It's not that someone with extroversion is bad in a group. It's just not related. The red ones are not related, but the green ones are. Conscientiousness can predict group effectiveness only when the levels of conscientiousness are similar between group members. So if everybody in the group has a similar level of conscientiousness, the group will be more effective. Secondly, agreeableness. Agreeableness strongly predicts group effectiveness. The more agreeableness there is, the more effective the group will be. The other ones, openness, extroversion, neuroticism, are red because they are not related to group effectiveness. Again, it's not that they're a bad thing, they're just not related. Team effectiveness is also affected by diversity. Diversity can include demographics such as gender, race, or age. In addition, diverse experiences, abilities, cultures, and physical characteristics may also be factors on which people differ. So in terms of group diversity, we're not just talking about gender, race, ethnicity, culture. We are talking about that, but we're also talking about diversity in terms of experience, how long you've been at the company, diversity of what departments the people come from in the company. All of those things lead to diversity in a group. When differences lead to lowered cohesion or unhealthy communication patterns, the groups face lower team effectiveness. So differences are not always a bad thing, but if it causes lowered cohesion, we'll talk about cohesion in a minute, but or when the differences cause unhealthy communication patterns, this can be a bad thing. So diversity can sometimes be a bad thing for group effectiveness. Sometimes diversity causes fault lines. Fault lines are social dividing lines that may split up a group into subgroups. This can be a good thing sometimes if the subgroups are based on knowledge, but it can be a bad thing if the subgroups are based on identity. Research has found that teams which emphasize commonalities in terms of goals and interests among team members rather than focusing on differences are more effective. So it's okay if there are differences, but when working as a group, it's best to focus on commonalities. Also, members who are able to express their differences to the group are more effective than groups where members try to suppress their differences. We'll talk about groupthink in a little bit, and you'll see that it's really important for team effectiveness that the whole team is able to feel comfortable in their differences and not have to hide them. Now we'll move on to the group processes that affect team effectiveness. The first is teamwork skills. Very importantly, employees who are knowledgeable about basic teamwork skills end up being more effective within their own teams. They're also rated higher by peers and supervisors. Teamwork knowledge, skills, and abilities among team members are related to better team performance. So having skills and knowledge about what good teamwork is, and skills such as conducting good meetings, results in effective teams. In this part, the book talks about stand-up meetings because this is something that can be effective for teams as well. Stand-up meetings are short meetings held standing up to help teams coordinate and share information regularly and efficiently, and they've been found to result in faster decision-making. The reason we talked about stand-up meetings in this section is that if you have good teamwork skills, you know how to conduct good meetings, and one example of good meeting is a stand-up meeting, not always. Something else that can affect team effectiveness is norms. Norms are the understood rules about how group members should behave. They help members understand what is expected of them and others. I put a picture of an elevator on this slide because, as you'll notice, everybody's facing forward toward the door. That's a norm. Nobody tells you to. You just get in the elevator and face the door like everybody else because it's the norm. When everybody understands the norms of the group is more effective. Team mental models, or TMM, are the degree to which individual conceptualizations are shared across the team. So groups with high TMM are more effective. If people have the same norms, shared norms, it's going to be more effective. One important norm relates to how much effort team members are expected to expend toward group goals and how the team evaluates and reinforces such expectations. These norms can lead to high group effectiveness. Something else that affects the group effectiveness or the team effectiveness are roles. As you can see, there are many different kinds of roles that can impact team effectiveness. I'll go through them real quick with you. There are the task-oriented roles. The contractor organizes and coordinates the actions. The creator creates new structures or visions. The contributor provides necessary information or expertise. The completer completes individual tasks and follows through. And the critic critically evaluates team decisions and questions things. Those are the task-oriented roles in a team. We don't need one person for each of these roles. One person can take on several roles, or several people can share a role as well. Next are the social-oriented roles, which include the calibrator, who creates new norms for team processes, the communicator, who creates a supportive social environment, and the cooperator, who conforms to expectations and supports others' decisions. The coordinator, now the boundary-spanning roles. The coordinator manages outside interactions, coordinates with outside parties, and the consul, who represents the team and its goal favorably to outsiders and inquires information and resources for the team. How leadership impacts team effectiveness varies on two dimensions: internal or external, and formal or informal. So a leader who's internal is embedded in the team, working with them all the time. A leader who's external is in charge of the team, right? Not always working with them, like a manager. Leaders can be formal, the person who is in charge and actually designated the team leader, or informal, someone who just kind of steps up and becomes a leader. And these things can all affect team effectiveness. Something else that affects team effectiveness is conflict. Unlike stress, conflict, it's not good to have a little bit. We want the less conflict, the better. At first, people thought that it was good to have a little bit of conflict. See, the upside down U graph was put forth several decades ago by many researchers who thought that it was good to have a little bit more conflict, just like it was good to have a little bit more stress. However, this is not true. Conflict in a team is never a good thing. Even a little bit of conflict results in lower effectiveness. Research shows that face-to-face developmental feedback from a peer or manager can reduce conflict, and that such feedback is most effective when delivered about halfway through the team's task. So the best way to reduce conflict is with feedback from a peer or manager, and the best time is halfway through working together. We'll talk about cohesion now. This is a very important part of team effectiveness, and it's related to the group affect and cognition. We'll talk about several aspects of group affect and cognition. The first is cohesion. Cohesion is the degree to which the group wishes to stay together in the future. This is very important. Cohesion is how much you want to work together next time or how much you want to stay together. So a little bit different than tenure. Tenure is how long you've actually been together. Cohesion is how long you want to stay together or how much you want to continue working together. Members of cohesive groups are characterized by collective identity, a shared sense of purpose, and satisfaction with the way the group operates. So if you're in a cohesive group, a group that likes working together and wants to keep working together, there'll be a high sense of purpose and a high sense of satisfaction. This is a very good thing for the group. Cohesiveness is good. Cohesiveness is high when group members have a lot in common. So remember how we talked about how diversity can sometimes be a bad thing in groups? It can be a bad thing for cohesiveness. It causes fault lines, which gets rid of cohesiveness. Cohesiveness is when everyone wants to keep working together, and this doesn't happen as much when there's a lot of diversity. Remember, diversity, I'm not talking about just race and age and gender. I'm talking about diversity in terms of where you come from in the organization, or how long you've been there for, or your level of expertise or your area of expertise. All of that is diversity. The more diverse a group, the less cohesion there is. So there's more cohesion, more wanting to stay together when the group members have a lot in common, when they have equal status. There's also more cohesion in a small group size. Stronger relationships are formed. They want to stay working together in small groups. Members of highly cohesive groups experience higher member satisfaction. If everybody wants to keep working together, obviously it makes sense. Everybody's satisfied in that group. And highly cohesive groups perform better. However, this is only when we're measuring work-related stuff. But that's the important stuff, right? If we're looking at how well these groups perform at work, cohesive groups perform better. Groups who want to stay together perform better. Almost done with team effectiveness. Now we'll talk about psychological safety. Psychological safety is the perception of negative or positive consequences of taking interpersonal risks in the workplace. Of course, if you feel like there's going to be a negative consequence for taking a risk, a social risk in the workplace, you're not going to do it, right? And the safer you feel, the more they're willing to share their ideas. And that high level of psychological safety, feeling good and safe and open to taking interpersonal risks, that will lead to high team effectiveness and ability to learn a lot and perform. There's lots of research behind this. Last one, team effectiveness is affected by something called team efficacy. Team efficacy is like the little train, I think I can, the little engine that could. Team efficacy is the extent to which a group believes it can perform its tasks well. It is highly related to effectiveness. Just thinking you can do it allows you to do it. Groups that think they can do it can do it. Now we'll quickly discuss the decision-making process. The rational decision-making model has 6 steps. First, clarify the problem or opportunity. Then develop alternative courses of action. Evaluate the alternative courses of action. Choose the best alternative. Implement the chosen course of action. And evaluate the course of action. So when making a decision, especially in a group, particularly in a group, these 6 steps are important. That first one, clarify the problem. Work with the group together. What's going on? What's the problem here? Next, develop lots of different choices, sort of like brainstorming, right? What are all the different things we could do to solve this problem? Third, you evaluate all those things. Make your lists of pros and cons. You just listed a bunch of options. Now evaluate them all. And step 4, choose one. After you've chosen the option, do it. Implement it, and when you're all done, evaluate. Kind of a common sense one, right? What's the problem? List all the choices, pick the best one, do it, evaluate. I just mentioned brainstorming. Let's define it. The brainstorming process includes trying to generate as many ideas as possible, not judging or evaluating the ideas during this process, encouraging creative or outrageous ideas even if they don't seem feasible, and piggybacking on others' ideas to improve upon them. right? When we're brainstorming, we encourage those creative or outrageous ideas. It might seem crazy, but you can work with it, right? We can keep molding it or changing it until it's doable. All right, groupthink is something that might sound good, but it's not. Groupthink was first coined by a researcher named Janus in 1972, and he explained that groupthink is a desire for group harmony that results in the avoidance of critical debate during decision making. So groups have decisions to make, they have work to be done, and if as a member of the group I'm too worried or too shy to stand up for myself, I'm too concerned with group harmony that I don't speak up, this is a bad thing. This is called groupthink. And groupthink has been linked to negative group outcomes, such as inflated sense of collective efficacy too early in the process, right? If nobody speaks up, everybody thinks everything's going wonderfully because everybody's too scared to say something. Secondly, suppressing productive conflict, right? Conflict can be productive sometimes and get things done, but if nobody speaks up, that'll never happen. This results in overconfidence and a lack of sufficient time spent on the decision-making process. So there's several symptoms of groupthink, and I like this little chart. It does a good job of summing it up. When you experience groupthink, remember you're so worried about everybody getting along, about group harmony, that you don't speak up. Some symptoms include invulnerability, where the group is overconfident, willing to take big risks, right? They think they can do it because everybody is happy so far. Rationalization, the group makes excuses or discounts warnings, right? What does he know? He's only been here 3 weeks. We all think everything's fine. Morality, the group ignores ethical or moral consequences since nobody's willing to speak up about it. Stereotyping outsiders, believing the opponents are too weak to make trouble. Self-censorship, pressure on dissent, illusion of unanimity, right? You think everybody agrees, but it's just because people aren't speaking up. And mind guarding, where somebody in the group will actually shield the members from opposite information, from opposition. So again, groupthink is a really bad thing. You want group members to always understand that it's good to speak up. It's good to tell the truth. And we don't want to preserve group harmony at the expense of saying what's on our mind. It's summary time. I'll try and do it nice and quick. I apologize for all the information on this slide. A group is a collection of individuals who interact and where one person's actions have an impact on the others. An informal group is a natural and spontaneous grouping of people. Formal groups are deliberate and systematic groupings of people in an organization. A group process is how the group approaches its work, and it can help or hinder the team's effectiveness. And a work team is an interdependent collection of individuals who share responsibility for specific outcomes for their organization. The original proposed stages of forming a group, of the group, is forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning. But we realized that in fact groups more experience punctuated equilibrium, where they change course in their approach to work over time, cycling between transition planning phases and action phases. Cross-trained teams have members who are trained to perform multiple roles. Service teams provide high-quality outcomes to customers. Project teams deal with ideas, knowledge, research development. Production teams make things. Management teams are the top leaders within the organization. Advisory teams are task forces or quality control groups that make suggestions to improve something. And action or performance teams deal with emergencies and crises. Over to the right side, team effectiveness is a measure of two facets of teams, their performance and their viability. Team viability is the ability and desire of group members to continue to work with one another, kind of like cohesion. Team performance is the successful delivery of an output to customers inside or outside the organization, right? How well does the team actually perform? Team effectiveness is affected by group composition, including size, tenure, personality, diversity, group processes, teamwork skills, norms, roles, and conflict, and group affect and cognition, cohesion, psychological safety, and team efficacy. Okay, I'll review those group affect cognition ones real quick. Cohesion is wanting to continue to work together in the future. It's a good thing. It happens when the groups are all similar, and it leads to high member satisfaction and high performance. Psychological safety is when you feel safe to take an interpersonal risk. You're more likely to learn faster and perform better in the group. And team efficacy is the little engine that could. When you think you can, and you do it better if you feel that efficacy, that a feeling that you can do it. Social loafing is related to group size. It's the tendency for group members to put forth less effort when there are more people. Group tenure is how long members have belonged to a certain group. Personality research shows us that agreeableness of members can predict high group effectiveness. Agreeableness is the main big 5 factor related to group effectiveness. Fault lines are social dividing lines that can split a group into subgroups based on one or more attributes. Norms are the understood rules about how group members should behave, and they help members understand what's expected of them and others. Team mental models are the degree to which individual conceptualizations are shared across the team, right? How much do we all think alike? Cohesion, the degree to which the group wishes to stay together. We talked about that. Psychological safety, the perception of negative or positive consequences of interpersonal risks. We just talked about team efficacy as well. And then brainstorming is working in a group to generate as many ideas as possible. Remember, we don't discount any ideas in brainstorming. And finally, groupthink is a tendency to desire group harmony and avoid critical debate during decision-making. Groupthink is a really bad thing because people don't speak up. Everyone thinks that everything's going wonderfully because nobody says anything about the issues that are going on. That's it for Chapter 13. I'll see you soon for our very last chapter, Chapter 14. Bye-bye.